One option that MDiv students have as part of their Master of Divinity program is to elect to take Clinical Pastoral Education, usually known as CPE. Now, at Trinity College, you don't have to take CPE to get your MDiv, but I would recommend that you consider doing it because many churches, and I would go so far as to say most churches, require CPE for ordination. And so while you're doing your MDiv, you might as well get that credential finished as part of your degree. So what is CPE, or Clinical Pastoral Education? It is a pastoral experience in a clinical setting, so in a non-church setting, usually in a hospital, sometimes in a prison or in a mental hospital, or would be some of the usual examples, but more and more it's largely in hospitals. You essentially become part of the chaplaincy team in a hospital, and different hospitals would organize this differently. You might be put on a certain ward, or you might do rounds, you might be on a trauma team in emergencies, depending on what hospital you're in. And you're not on your own, however. You're part of a cohort, so you're generally usually not the only student doing CPE in one of these hospitals, and you have a supervisor. So someone who oversees your learning, someone who supports you on bad days, and someone who you meet with regularly to talk through your experiences in this clinical setting. Now, why do churches want you to have this training as part of your MDiv? Because they recognize that in pastoral ministry, even if you're not hoping to be a chaplain, you're hoping to be a priest or a pastor in a congregation, you're going to encounter a lot of very intense situations, sometimes emergency situations, or just sometimes just very emotional and complicated situations. And people need you to have the skills, sufficient skills, not to be a perfect counselor or to replace any need for clinical professionals like a psychiatrist or a trained therapist of some kind, but to do two things. One is to recognize some basic skills and have them in place about how to deal with people in crisis. But secondly, and this is just as important, to be in your own being as healthy as possible when living through a crisis situation as someone called to support others. If you've never been in that situation, in an emergency situation, or being with someone in a crisis, it can be very, very difficult. And it can also sometimes trigger some unresolved emotions or pressures in your own life. And that's normal. That's not a failing of your part. But what CPE works to do is help you recognize your own emotional reactions to complicated and difficult situations and have a safe place to talk it through with your supervisor and with others in your cohort. So it's very, very helpful in part of training for pastoral ministry, and in my own experience, a really useful way to prepare and for ministry, but also to learn about yourself. So I recommend it highly. Now, there are two ways you can get this training here at Trinity College and in Toronto School of Theology. The first way is the standard way. There is an organization called CASC, or the Canadian Association for Spiritual Care, and they run the formal programs of CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education. And you need to apply to them to get accepted. And when you apply, you do two things. I mean, you describe who you are, you're doing an MDiv, what year you're in usually makes a difference. So you have, not everyone who applies is accepted on the first time. So the higher you are in, through your degree, normally the better chance you have. And you get to, choose or identify where you would hope to do your placement. And you can look online, and there's programs in all different cities, different provinces around Canada, but if you're in Toronto, like, you would say, okay, maybe I would, tell them my top three, like I'd hope to do at this hospital, or this hospital, and so on. You identify where you hope to do it, who you are, and then you apply. Normally it's in November, and you do that through Sydney Young. So through our office, even though you're not applying to Trinity, you're applying to CASC, Sydney can help you do all that application process. And normally those experiences are for 12 weeks in the late spring and summer, but different programs have slightly different dates, so I won't rehearse possible dates. Sometimes there are programs that are done part-time over a year. So some people do this full-time for 12 weeks. Some people, if they have the opportunity and want to do it, they can do it in a longer period of time, but part-time. And that's helpful, obviously, if you get a full-time job that you can't get 12 weeks away from. And when you do this, you can get 2 credits as from part of your degree. And again, you talk to Sydney Young to make sure you get registered for those 2 credits as part of this degree. So that's the standard way to do CPE. It's the way most people do it, and it's a long-standing, an excellent program. But we have an alternative way. This is generally restricted only to Anglican students preparing for ordination, although if that's not you, it might be possible, but normally it's only for Anglicans. And it goes as follows. Instead of applying to CASC, Trinity and Wycliffe have organized their own version of CPE, and we've done this mostly to make it possible for more students to get into the program. So it's not that there's something wrong with the other program, but we wanted to make it easier for more people to take the program, and so particularly Anglicans preparing for ordination. So the second version is not run by CASC, but it's Trinity and Wycliffe together. And how you take part in this course is you must enroll in a level 1 course at Wycliffe called Boundaries and Bridges. And that's often offered every semester, I mean twice a year. No, not really necessarily in the summer, but so you need to take that course. And it's an excellent course, and you don't have to do CPE if you take this course, but you might just take that course if you want to keep this as a possibility for you as a way to do CPE. So you take Boundaries and Bridges. After you've completed that course, you can apply for part 2 of the course. And not everyone gets in, but you apply for this through Sydney or through Wycliffe, either option. Advanced Pastoral Studies is the course. And you would do your placement at here in Toronto in North York at St. John's, and you would have a supervisor, similar model to CPE, but it's done in one setting with one supervisor, and you do this as a course as part of your degree. Okay. Now, because you have to do Boundaries and Bridges and Advanced Pastoral Studies, if you go this route for CPE or its equivalent, this will count as 3 credits. You get 1 credit for Boundaries and Bridges, whether or not you do the second part. But if you do the Advanced Pastoral Studies, you get 2 credits for that. So it's 3 together. So you need to, if you want to have this as part of your MDiv, be sure to leave enough credit space, or unless you want to do course overload, but who wants to do course overload? And that's generally restricted for Anglicans. Now, with those 2 options, it should be quite possible for everyone who wants to do CPE to do clinical pastoral education. Occasionally people come back after they've finished their MDiv to do this course of work, but obviously they do that because they want to get ordained and they've been told they need to have it, so it will slow down your ordination process. For some of you that's not a problem, you're perfectly content with a slower path towards ordination. But for those of you planning on being ordained soon after your MDiv, you should really consider CPE, or at least speak with your church authorities and find out whether or not they will require you to have CPE as part of your education before they will ordain you. Any further questions about CPE? There's some information on the Toronto School of Theology webpage, and there's also, you can always Google it, CPE Toronto or wherever area you live in, or the CASC website, Canadian Association for Spiritual Care.